Hi, welcome to another episode of Building Site. I'm Malcolm Sparks, the CTO of JUXT. Last episode I was working with Jeremy on authorization using Zanzibar. We kind of did a little implementation of a mini Zanzibar. So check out, that's episode 37 if you want to look at that. On a previous episode we were talking with, I was talking with Alex and about how to put authorization into GraphQL, and this is what I'm going to try to do over the next course of maybe 2 or 3 episodes. So that will be the emphasis, trying to get authorization rules baked into GraphQL. Now, when we were exchanging a few ideas, I said something to Alex which I felt instinctively at the time wasn't quite right, and that was that I felt that authorization should be at what we call in JUXT the form layer. Now, to explain what I mean by the form layer and a bit of the JUXT jargon, I need to kind of introduce you to the methodology that we use in JUXT. And we've had this methodology written down for, well, we thought about for a number of years, but written down, I think over a year ago, we made a kind of major revision to our website. And here we talk about the methodology that we have, and it starts off with these kind of 4 layers, 4 planes if you like. The first plane, the lowest plane, the bedrock, we believe that everything should be built on a temporal plane. We call it bitemporal because we like to define temporality as being a business time, a business concept, rather than just the kind of the more primitive transaction time that you get in some database products. But when time is still, when it's controllable, when you can control time, then you kind of bring in back the determinism that we often miss in distributed systems, where the output of a function or a result depends on the timing that things took place, or latency or race conditions. It's very important for us. We've as closure developers, we've really benefited from using immutability inside our programs, and we really want to see that immutability exported out into the data landscape. But we lay upon that this idea of data, a data plane, where we are, our thoughts about data are that it's we really come from the semi-structured data camp. By that we believe that data or entities in data and modeling the world is a very, very complex thing, and there are explicit and implicit relationships everywhere. In fact, the more you dig, the more you see that you uncover relationships. Just as you were, if you were to dig up a garden and you would discover the root system of your garden, all the different plants and trees, their roots all be intertwined, and there's a vast kind of rhizome in life where things are connected in all kinds of ways, and very, very difficult to model that. So a semi-structured view allows us to think about that data as being very easy to capture new relationships without having to do data migrations and change table structures and so on. But it's not enough. We know that at some level you do need schema again, and that's why we have another layer called form. And form is really us placing, the key word here is, I think we've got this captured, is it's a construct for interpreting, analysing and extracting value. So this is all about perspective. Schema on read, you might have heard of, or what you're doing is sort of taking a lens and you're kind of shaping the lens to view some data, and so you can kind of see it and make sense of it. And it's the same data underneath. And hence my discomfort with thinking that authorization was a form level idea, because or should be implemented at the form level, because it shouldn't really be possible to, if you're not allowed to see or not authorized to see a piece of data, you shouldn't be able to just tweak the lens or create a new kind of focus it in such a way that you can now see a piece of data. If data should be occluded from you, then it should be occluded no matter what your kind of spyglass what level of zoom or the shape of your lens. And so really I kind of want to go back to thinking about defining authorization lower down. We were talking about defining authorization rules at the GraphQL schema level. So the way that we see this is that the GraphQL schema, the SDL that we're building, is at the form layer, and that GraphQL queries themselves are at the code layer. So GraphQL queries are emitted by applications that need to get some data. The queries are constrained and go through a kind of lens, which is the form layer, and then we write these mappings inside the form layer to map these kind of shapes down to their kind of the raw semi-structured data underneath. And it's the raw semi-structured data where I want to put the authorization logic into. Now, we did that yesterday with Zanzibar. We were working directly against XT, and so I want to preserve that thinking as we go into another round of development to try to get authorization baked in to site at the data level. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of coding around that, and we'll see where we get to. There is something that I want to be able to do to move the current example application that we're building, the card application, to a GraphQL API. Quite excited by GraphQL. I think there's a lot of potential to it. Currently our card application, as you might have seen in previous episodes, is built on site, but it goes through the REST API. And once that works fine, just be nice to move over everything into GraphQL just to practice and see what it looks like. That's what we'll be doing over the next few episodes, and hopefully it won't take us that long, but we'll be using kind of GraphQL all the way. Right, so what I want to do is, this is our GraphQL schema. I would like to get it to a point where we can get it kind of feature compatible with the OpenAPI equivalent. This is the OpenAPI file on the right hand side. It's written in Eden, although it gets converted to JSON. Eden is I prefer it as a source format because it's kind of it's more forgiving. It doesn't, it's easy to edit in Emacs. It doesn't require commas, and comma counting is a pain. So it's a very, very pleasant format to work in. Particularly if you're a Clojure programmer and you've got your Clojure editor set up for it. But I mean, you can just look at this as kind of JSON, really. The other aspect is, okay, so in here we have a method or a URI path down at the bottom. I think it's called /user or something. And this is to get the information about the currently logged in user. We want to see that. See what it looks like in Swagger. Well, we want to create something similar in GraphQL. So I'll just fire up at my local version of site and wait for that to come up. Often we work against production, but in this case I want to have a local version. So here we are. This is running locally. And we will go to our GraphQL we'll go to our REST Swagger, which is here, and if I click on get user, try it out, and what we see here is that we've got Malcolm Sparks, because I'm Malcolm and I'm logged in. I've got the role of super user against this machine, and the auth scheme is, I've got a session token. So that is what we want to present in a GraphQL interface. So if we look at our current GraphQL interface, we don't have that. We just have some system information that we show that. So what we'd really like to have is this kind of a current, or the subject, the person, me, coming in. And once we've got the subject, you see, we've got we'll have access to the subject for authorization. So there is a point to doing this. We want to build up the authorization, and that will require the subject as an argument. Okay, so we'll start off here with our site schema. Let's make it a root query. So I'm going to use a block comment here, access the currently logged in user, and in authentication parlance that is called the subject. So we could call it current user, I'll call it the site subject. I'm kind of using a prefix for my GraphQL types because I think actually GraphQL types might need to be kind of globally unique, and so I'm just using that suffix so it doesn't get confused with other schemas for now. And we're going to put in, I think we'll use this resolver trick where we'll bring in a function which we will define. Let's call it GraphQL. I think we'll call it internal resolver because it's a site internal thing, and let's make that called subject. Okay, so we will now have to create that namespace enclosure, so that will be GraphQL. Don't have a directory there, GraphQL, and underneath there we'll create a namespace called internal resolver. Enclosure, the file names are underscore, but that's only because you can't have hyphens in Java package names, so they have to be underscores instead. Right, now we'll add a little, define a little function which we're going to call subject, and I think it's just going to get some, I probably need to look up one that I might have done earlier, the system one, just to see, right, it's going to get some context, but the context we don't really need because we don't need any arguments or we don't need any parent object. There's no parent object, it's the root of the query. Okay, so yeah, I think we're good to implement. So from here I might just put in something that looks like a site subject. So we're going to define site subject. This is our schema driven development. The site subject will have, well, let's design one. We want it to look a little bit like this one. So this returns us, if you remember, this returns us some user information, which we have. We have that already because that's called a site user. So let's just pop in that, a site user. But we probably also want this auth scheme. So let's put that down as a string. Okay, so that should be enough. We've just got to kind of model that really. I'm going to make that I'll make it empty, and then auth scheme, I'll just hard code that for now to be session. Okay, does it? I don't know what I'm doing there. I think I've been drinking too much Java today. Right, let's go to deploy this. So we've changed the schema. Now we need to deploy that, and we do that with this. Well, we go into GraphQL, and we go, give me a token. I think that's because my token is wrong. I think it's because we did this import and we all got kind of, let me see what my, is it site local? Let's try it again. Okay, and now I've got a token. I think we're using a makefile for this one. Now we can refresh, and you'll see we've got a new subject there. So we will ask for the author scheme, hit play, and I just might move myself down there. You can see that we've got an author scheme of session, which is because we kind of hard coded it. So that's cheating. So, okay. What can we do to get the currently logged in user? Now, I don't know, I can't remember how the original implementation worked, the OpenAPI one. So let's have a look and try to decipher what's going on. So here we are looking for, we're saying look for any subject that has a user where, right, there must be something that kind of magically replaces this keyword here with the logged in subject. It might be when we execute that OpenAPI query. So we'll dive into Apex, which is where we implement anything to do with OpenAPIs is in this Apex thingy. And we'll have a look for that keyword subject. Don't find it, I'm just going to grep for it. Okay, so what's happening here, it's putting in it's actually putting in to speculatively, which is, so we'll move over there. We can see that, so this code is speculatively putting in just here it's got the subject and it's putting it into the database, or it's associating, that's right, it's associating a crux ID of the subject keyword, but this is putting it into the database with this with TX, which is a speculative kind of transaction, which will disappear after, we create from one DB, we create a new DB that has that subject in it. So the question is, where does this subject come from? It gets passed in, it's actually part of the request. Let's try and find out, when we implement GraphQL, what happens to the request. Can we thread it through to our GraphQL resolver code? Well, the GraphQL code, and I'm sorry that this is a little bit long-winded explanation, but essentially we call query here. This is the bit that we need. We need the subject in here, really, or we can put the request in. So where does query actually happen? Well, it happens in this post handler, and this post handler is this post handler is the thing that handles the queries, the GraphQL queries. Now, in our system, I mean, generally speaking, GraphQL queries are often posts. They can be gets with a query string. You've chosen the method put. Our put handlers are the things that accept new schemas, because inside you can override schemas. It's a kind of a dynamic thing. You're developing schemas. But when you're sending GraphQL queries, then they are posts. So this is why you have a put handler and a post handler. And these, if you want to kind of see why those symbols are called that way, if we have a look at and see when we deploy the GraphQL feature into site, we have we have a set of resources which we add to the database. Site is extended. Site is extended by adding stuff to the database. That's mostly where all the configuration is. And here we have the var name of this function. Okay, that's how it all gets kind of put together. Let's look further down. So when we come to do our query, we can now bring in our subject. So let's do that. Pass keys subject. And then when we do the query, let's put in the subject as the last thing, perhaps. Now we might later decide we'll put the whole request in, but that might be a bit overkill for now. And when we call the resolver, I think we might just associate on the subject here. Let's make that the pass subject. There's no real need to change a keyword, I don't believe, to a different namespace. That doesn't really add much value. And so there we are. Let's go to our the resolver that we created, the internal resolver, and this now will have the subject. Now, I don't know what the subject looks like. Well, we sort of do know what the subject looks like. Do we? Well, we can do a number of things. So what we could do here is pull it out of the args, and we could log it. Log trace subject is something subject. Apologies, it's been a long day. Okay, so what we'd hope now is that when we hit play on here, we should see something in our log. So I'll just tail the logs, really small, hit play again, and there you can see, zoom right up here, subject is, and we have this stuff. Another thing that you can do in Clojure, by the way, is if you want something to be a bit more friendly, you can just kind of temporarily do that, and now we have the subject in our REPL, so we can say what keys do we have. That's just a little trick of the trade. We have this user, we have their username. So what are we wanting to, how do we satisfy this schema? We want to put in ID will be the crux db ID. Well, I suppose we can say get in subject, and we'll get in the user, and it would be useful to know what is in that user. Right, so that is the ID. Okay. Okay. Just see what's in this subject in its entirety. Okay, we have the author scheme. So that is now pass auth scheme unhard code that. We can say let user X entity, we've got the DB has come through, don't know, we'll need the DB. Let's do it. Let's put it there. Just destructure that now. We can say it's the pass user over the subject. Then we get the whole user. And then the ID here, we need the name, which will be, or why don't we look that up? I think we can do this. No, well, we can go to the REPL and do this. All right. The ID, let's just, yeah, I think we can just look up from the REPL, just cheating, just see what's in here. We'll have this thing. So the username is going to be the username of the user, the ID is that, or we can even say the crux DB ID of the user. Now we have the name, which is the name of the user, and then we have the email, which is the email of the user, and then we're going to have a bunch of roles. For now, I'm just going to make that an empty list, and let's see how that works. No implement. There's something that then, perhaps I didn't recompile. That looks like an empty database, so I'll recompile the GraphQL namespace. That should bring us back. Yeah, and we'll say we want the email. What's going on? We're still getting the log. Put a throw. Yeah, that's hit a break. I'm sorry I can't do much about this font. So we have a break here. Let's looks like an exception is thrown here. You know, DB is in there now. Oh yeah, now it's working. The username is still null. I might for now just print out what I've got. Don't know why that doesn't. Oh, I think that's probably the problem there, that I'm naming, I've got that and it's overwriting this function on and that's breaking it. Let's run that back. That's probably a poorly named function. There we are, ID is null. Username, null. Subject is the username, right? So don't know what I'm doing wrong there. There we are. Auth scheme. Username. I got the username wrong. Ah, there's a directive there. Okay, that's why. So if we want to reuse that type, yeah, we'll have to make that. We'll have to return that. Yeah, now we've got enough. We want to get the username out as before. The ID is still, I would imagine there's something similar happening with the ID. That's right, so we have to make that. So it's essentially the user merged in. Well, you know, name is going to work, email is going to work. So why don't we do that? Hey, that wasn't a bad idea, because that just worked. Whoa, that's pretty cool. And in fact, what we could do something similar with this auth scheme. We could give it a little A and say your JUXT pass alpha auth scheme. We do it more declaratively. No, that's not going to work. Let's not. Okay, I think we're there now. We've got everything working. Yeah, if we look up there, you can see the query. We're not going to see the roles yet, but yeah, that we've kind of almost done that. We take out the traces, this stuff, and I didn't think it would be that easy. Now we need the roles. So the roles are going to be this query, but hey, that might just work without us doing anything. Because the user is this object. Would that work? Well, we could give it a go. How would we give it a go? By just not returning anything for roles. Alright, let's give, maybe it works already. Yeah, it does. It already works. How clever. It works because we already have a field resolver defined for here. All we just had to do is associate in the user that we get out of the user entity in the Crux database, XT database. So there we are. Fantastic. I think that's enough for today. I think we've just covered quite a lot there. We've been going for over half an hour. So I might wrap that up. So that is, all we need. I can deploy. So what we're going to do there is just add our resources. We can say add subject to GraphQL. Sites GraphQL query. Log in user. Pop that there. Pop it up to master. Perhaps it should run the tests. Try those again. Though I find CoArcher a little bit unreliable. Doesn't always work, and I'm not sure why. There we are. That worked. Sometimes it hangs, and I'm not quite sure. Okay, so we shall now we've pushed, we can, oh, not that one. We're going to SSH to our production machine. We're going to pull the latest. I often, well, they've got the latest there, and then restart the server. That's not sufficient because we also have to go into we have to redeploy, or we have to deploy this so that we need to get the token, but we're not ready yet, so we will just I think we're ready now. Deploy. Let's go to home. Got to log in. Let's go to site. GraphQL. We've got the new root query here. Let's bring out the everything, and there we are, the logged in user. That's all working. So hope you enjoyed that. There was a few glitches, mostly my kind of incompetence, but I hope that didn't ruin your fun. And next time we'll have a look at plugging in our authorization into this, so we can only, now we've got the subject, we can use the subject and say, hey, is Malcolm allowed to see this particular resource? And we can say yes or no. So that should be fun. Catch us next time, next episode. Have a nice day, nice evening, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.